Okay, hello everyone. I think you hear me now. Okay, hello everyone and welcome to this panel we're organizing in the Spanish pavilion. First of all, I would like to thank our esteemed panelists who accepted the invitation to participate with us in the session today. So we have Isis from Chile, we have Kathy from China, and we have Pooja from India. These are four young climate activists that have extensive experience in climate-related topics, inside and outside COP. They all have several backgrounds in the youth organizations back in their countries, and who are also willing to share their expertise and knowledge with us, suggestions also how to engage in climate governance topics back in the countries. So we are hoping for them to just give us some knowledge sharing and experience on how they are engaged in their own climate governance structures back in Chile, in China, and in India. Let me introduce myself first, okay? I'm Angel, I'm the head of International Affairs and Climate Action of the Spanish Youth Council, and with me there are other 5 youth representatives that are coming on behalf of the Spanish Youth Council and the Ministry of Ecological Transformation in Spain. We have Jordi, Pablo, Paula, Irene, and Gabriel, 6 delegates that are coming also to shadow the job on the negotiations that the ministry is doing, and on behalf of us, we are just following also youth organizations and their positions and EU youth delegation topics. I will ask our panelists also to introduce themselves, okay, just before our participants can ask you some questions. So feel free to comment anything on your background, anything you want to share. How have these days been for you already at COP? We are at day 3 of COP, so how has the experience been for you already? And also your background experience back in your countries. Okay, so I think maybe we can start in order from there. Pooja, you want to start?
Yeah, hello everybody, my name is Pooja. I just wanted to correct one thing. So I was born in India but grew up in the US. So yeah, just wanted to correct that. But so I run an org called Youth Climate Collaborative, and we do a lot of work around COP to help youth have access to COP. So finding badges, finding accommodations, finding opportunities to connect with each other while here and before and after. And this year, it's a lot better for me personally in terms of mental health and capacity, because last year we had a pavilion, the Entertainment and Culture Pavilion, and did like 130 events in 2 weeks, and I was dead. And this time we have no pavilion because it's very expensive, so can breathe a bit. I'll turn it to Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, I got here on Friday evening, and on Saturday I thought, oh gosh, I'm exhausted, and it hasn't even started yet. How am I going to get through the next 2 weeks? But turns out a few more extra hours of sleep, or actually a few hours of sleep, make a lot of difference. So now I'm alive again. So I guess my tips for everyone is ginger shots, which unfortunately I haven't found it in any grocery stores here. Ginger tea, vitamin, a few hours of sleep, flu jab, which cost me 20 pounds. That's my top tips. But so far, very busy, and at this COP, I have my new day job with BirdLife International that I'm really excited about, but at the same time, it's also very busy with tons of events, full of negotiations, coordinating a delegation of almost 20 people. So, but it's exciting, kind of fun. So yeah, I'm enjoying it, and also catching up with so many incredible friends in the space. So yeah, in general, on a positive note.
So, hi, I am Isis Riquelme. I am climate activist, entrepreneur, and environmental educator from Chile. My work is the 11th work in this. So my focus is the climate movement in Fridays for Future Chile, and Tremendas is an organization for girls and women to act SDGs. So climate negotiation, my focus is in the climate mobility, in lesson damage, gender, and naps in adaptation in this scope. And in the other scope, my focus is gender, sorry, gender. In my work, is an entrepreneur at Chukau. It's a startup for the climate events, so forest fires and floods and droughts in my country and others country, specifically France and Amazonia countries. So this is my focus in general.
So thank you for your presentations. As you have seen, there are different ways of connecting back in based on the reality of each country on how to engage on climate-related organizations. Now we have people who are now more related to United Nations, people who are still more engaged in their home organization than their communities back in their countries, and in the end that there is different ways to then come here, different realities to then come here and participate at COP, bring different experience from their home countries, and that is why we organize this panel. No? We have the title of the panel is called "From the Street to the COP," which it really means that there are different realities and experience back home that then we are bringing here to the negotiations, to different meetings with youth organizations, and then building a result or outcomes that actually come up with the reality of different countries in this sense, Chile, China, and India. So the idea is that you can ask them questions related to the topic that we are saying here, okay, from the streets to the COP, and also related to youth climate empowerment. We'll wait for a second. So the idea is that we can ask them questions related to the topic, okay, to action for climate empowerment, and about their experiences outside the COP, possible difficulties they have had back in their own stakeholders or countries when they are pushing for action, when they are putting forward recommendations in their home countries, and also best practices that you can both share. I wanted don't worry, we just introduce ourselves, so just not to miss you, if you want to quickly introduce yourself to the participants.
Yes, of course. I'm so sorry for my lateness. I was in another panel and got a little bit lost here. But I'm here now. Nice meeting you all. I'm Maíra de Roussan from Brazil. I'm a volunteer at Empodera Clima, that is an organization, a youth-led organization that advocates for climate and gender. So we work specifically on that intersection. And I'm a researcher there, so we have a multi-language database with all things gender and climate. And I also act as a specialist on climate financing for Solos, that is a waste management startup in Brazil. And yes, so that's a little bit about me. And if you have any questions, well, I'm open to answer.
Yes. Okay. So the idea now, just for you also tonight, is that we will be having, let's say, like a world cafe format, but also in the way that our streaming works. So we are kind of going to stay in the place we are at the moment, and also the public is going to share with you some reflections or some ideas they have, and you can like to establish, let's say, a dialogue based on the questions they have and also your own experience. If you want to also mention something and you want to open the debate somehow, you feel free to open any discussions. Okay?
Well, thank you so much. This is Jordi, also one of the winners of Generación Clima and Spanish youth delegate, alongside my 5 partners here. I've got one question for Isis and Maida, which is related with the fact that in Latin America there are a lot of challenges for climate activism, I'd like to ask you if you have how have you overcome these challenges, if you have identified a pattern, and if you as women feel to be more or feel that these challenges are more difficult to overcome because of your condition. Thank you.
So something interesting about me is that my activism started in Canada when I used to live in Canada, but I was born in Brazil and I live there now. But I went to university there and my activism started there, so that was like really the seed that really put me into the climate debate. So that's where actually I had contact with people who also wanted to mobilize. So my first protest, my first movement in the streets was actually in September 2019, that we had the big strike on climate change. I think you might remember that because it was a really big movement. At least in Montreal, where I live, it was like 1 million people in the streets. So that was a really great first experience. And going off from that and going back to Brazil, the activism I do, it's mostly online because unfortunately people don't really go to the streets to demand anything, actually, not only climate related. So it's very hard mobilizing for that kind of activism, especially around youth. We don't see people going to the streets, but we do a lot of online activism. So that's the way we found to reach more people, especially young people. It's through social media and online platforms. That's how you can use like an accessible language and also make it as if something fun for them, right? So they're reading about that on social media. They're like, it's their recreative time that they're spending, but they're still thinking about it. So that's why we have the database with all of the resources on climate and gender, so people can actually go online and look it up. But we are looking to expand that, right, and go to the real life and through educational projects, especially in public schools. So that's the way we're working around it. Very fortunately for me, I never had any issues while doing my activism, like other people in Latin America have, from more vulnerable communities, from rural communities. So I'm very lucky, I'm very privileged in that sense. And about being a woman, I don't think that has hindered me in any way or capacity. Actually, what I see in Brazilian activism, at least, is that women are way more active and way more present in that debate than men are. I'm not saying that that's generalize it to every country, but what I see is actually a very big movement from women participating in that. So it's actually a great way for women to find a safe space as well to share and talk about that kind of issue. So yeah, just to start off, that would be my answer.
My first protest is 5 years. So in Chile, it's very normal, the movement, the protest, and very great for part of people. The environment defenders in Chile is the... Sorry, what is 80. 80, yes? Yeah. And the environment defender in Chile, 80% is a woman, and especially indigenous women. So is for the woman is more affected for the contamination and involucrated for the crisis of the water in Chile. Too much problem for the water, for the its privacy. And the killing and persecution for environment defenders. So this is the principal case. But many problems in Latin America. So it's very normal. Is defense to the environment, to defense to the right of life. So this in general.
I mean, happy to quickly add on that. A lot of my work, and actually in the introduction, forgot to mention, so my background is very much civil society advocacy in this beautiful and chaotic convention processes, but very much focus on civil society advocacy, youth and gender, especially in the multilateral policy world. And for gender, I think, if we look around the country delegations, a lot of them would have incredible feminist activists or activists in general, and there's a really high composition of women or generally not men. But when you look at the people making decisions, the people in senior positions in governments or delegations, that balance is the opposite. So obviously, I think Brazil is a great example with incredible women leaders like Marina Silva, like Sonia Guajara, like Anna Toni, but in many other countries. And is this recorded? In perhaps some host countries, that is not the case. So there's still, of course, we see a lot of women fighting climate justice. Does not equivalent to there is no gender issues in this movement.
Thank you. So my name is Diego. I come from Tsinghua University. I've been studying in China for 12 years now, and my question would be directed to Kathy. Because I'm a climate activist in China, I've gone to a lot of schools around Guangzhou and like Guangdong province, teaching about climate change during these couple of years. And there are very specific challenges when it comes to climate advocacy and being, do this kind of work in China, I would say. First of all, I would say that youth in China are not that well taught about the problems that climate change has. And so they do not really care about this issue as much as probably developed countries and their youth do. And another thing is that in some key aspects, I would say that advocacy in China is frowned upon in some ways. So as Chinese, what do you think are the key challenges that we have doing advocacy in China, or like advocacy as a whole in China, and how can we help make youth more educated in this matter?
Yeah, I guess, and I would love to hear from others in terms of their perspectives too. But for me, my advocacy mainly really started after I moved to the UK, and it was, but it originally started in China. But I think it was really interesting that I think to some extent I see a lot of people care about climate and the environment since they were kids, right? And in schools you would go pick up litter or go to a waste facility. So I think, and also save energy. I think that's rooted in the public's opinions and lives. But I think perhaps there's different ways of seeing climate movements. For example, protests would be not the same as some, for example, an EU member state country. So I think there are different, obviously, restrictions and different realities that people live in, and different systems that and ways of seeing the system that people grew up in. So I guess that's why it led to different ways of how people do their bits in climate action. But I think I have seen various incredible youth-led organizations in China doing capacity building, doing education with teenagers, with adults. So yeah, I think overall I'm really impressed considering the situation and what is possible and feasible. But I guess, yeah, I see a lot of climate action, but of course limited in terms of the form of activism and calling out, whether it's businesses or government or other parts of society. I think it could be obviously it's a bigger societal reason behind it. But I definitely see a lot of momentum and passion from young people and from other generations. And of course, in many ways, looking at private sector, they're really leading the way in energy transition and electric vehicles, solar panels, but of course there are challenges.
Yeah, you mentioned that you would like to hear some other perspectives as well, so I'm just going to dive in a little bit. I don't think it's only a China problem when it comes to climate education. I feel like most countries are not prepared to educate their youth on the climate issues and the climate problems. I see that especially as well in Brazil and in Latin America, is that climate education is not available in schools, right? At least not in Brazil. So it is an issue. When we talk about climate, people usually frown upon it. So advocacy in general is usually not seen in a good light in many ways, especially about climate. It's very a divisive theme, right? It shouldn't be, but it has become a divisive theme in most of the world. It's very bipolar in that sense. So I feel like we have a lot of work to do in every country when it comes to climate education and in climate mobilization as well. Because as we see, as my experience in Brazil at least, we don't have that kind of mobilization that we go to the streets. So we usually, as I said before, we stick to the online. But it should also be on our government's hands, right, to give this, to really give us the tools to learn and to go to school and learn that kind of thing. I did a workshop on climate education at a public school in Brazil, and we were talking basic things such as do not throw trash, do not litter the streets, you know. So it's like little things that they were like, oh yeah, I'm gonna throw the trash like in the streets like that. But they were like, yeah, but there's no trash cans. So yeah, we're gonna ask them to throw it away, but where are the trash cans? If the government is not like also giving us the tools to do, you know, more, to do better. So I think it's obvious it should be an integrative perspective, but yeah, we really need the government support. The youth really needs it, and to really reach more audiences. And we end up doing their work, right? So as we were saying, we go online, we try to disseminate, we try to spread the information as much as we can so we can reach the youth, because otherwise they're not going to be reached.
Actually, if you don't mind, I would love to quickly add a point is, on one end I see a lot of, obviously, the challenging, well, the system is quite different from many other countries, but also at the same time, that reminded me, there was this multilateral initiative working on building capacity for national stakeholders in their planning on climate, biodiversity, and desertification, and various other environmental issues that are obviously tackled separately in the UN space. And as part of that, the guiding questions for a session was, as young people, indigenous peoples, driving actions on the ground, what can you do to stop the silos in these issues in your work? And I was sitting at the same table with various incredible indigenous youth, and we're all looking at each other being like, yeah, we're not the ones creating the silo, right? It's the governments, and it's almost, I don't think it's the right term to say it's a Western perspective, but it is the governments, the multilateral processes that created, this is a climate action, this is a nature action, whereas, for example, indigenous peoples, for generations and generations, they have done what we describe as climate action, biodiversity action, but they wouldn't necessarily label it with the exact same words. So I think that's also that element of recognizing, and I think, for example, I think that was my personal experience growing up in China is, for example, save energy, or turn off the lights, or don't litter. People don't really describe it as an environmental action, but obviously, like, there are considerations. It saves money and things like that. But I think people also want to do good, but then it's not mainstreamed as we're doing this because we want to fight climate change. So yeah, I guess there are two elements to that.
Yes, I don't know. I also wanted to ask something. Also, if the public can think of more questions. I was thinking about the title of the panel, no? From the streets to the COP. But there are a lot of things in between. Like there are local activism, there's like regional, national activism. So I wanted to also ask you if you have any best practices, both from your own experience or that you have seen that at the local, regional, and national level, climate activism and mobilization has led to improve or to pass some laws or regulations that have improved climate the climate situation in your country. Like, as you see, there's a huge gap, no, from your own personal activism and commitment to the climate cause, and then coming here to the COP, to the negotiations. There are a lot of things in between. Are there any like best practices that you have seen in your country or in any other countries that youth organizations and youth activism and mobilization has worked to pass some good regulations on this?
So one of my friends, he's from Guam, and they have like a youth climate council type thing in Guam, and they mobilize lots of youth to get a plastic bag ban there. We've also seen that in Kenya, plastic bags are banned, and that's reduced a lot of pollution in the country as a whole. So, when youth pick an issue, stay focused, mobilize, find the key partners, whether it's legal partners or those working on policy, usually a combination, right? You need funders, you need mobilizers, you need people who have connections with politicians, with policy writers, to get those pieces going, get feedback on your work, create subgroups, working groups, and then have specific roles for each of you. I think one of the best practices is to be prepared ahead of time, right? If you kind of know the process of what it takes to pass a policy like a plastic bag ban, then you want to make sure you have the roles set out to ensure that you can allow for that. Make sure you have the documents prepared of what you want, exactly how you would want the text written. Whose support do you already have? Do power mapping, right, to see where decision-making power lies. So you know who are the key people that you need to reach out to. But yeah, one of the best things to do, even when you're running a nonprofit, for example, right, which I do, one of the key ways to kind of be ahead or stay on your toes is to be prepared. Have your concept notes ready for each project. Have a list of funders already that fund that type of work. Know which digital tools to use to make your life easier to search for these resources and tools. Take advantage of your social networks or your friends' networks and social media, and just keep asking people for the help that you need until you get that help or figure out a way to achieve that outcome, right? Maybe you all have some other tips to add, and then I can add more.
For the first tips is intergeneration movement. In Chile, the work is in the indigenous people, youth people, women, grandfathers, grandmothers, involved, the families involved in the protest, and the school involved in the protest, the universities. So it's necessary the articulating the actors and private sector is very important to the financial to projects. The climate project is the private sector. The other tips is prepared. Yes, it's very necessary. You have conversation to high-level peoples. You need prepared. You need a concept. You need what is his name? Sorry. Do you need money, or do you need the political request? How do you need? So. The other very important is the act. So the protest is very important, but do you need actions in the youth movement? Do you need projects? So the climate crisis. So the protest is very important, but the action is more.
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit on that. Coming a lot from what you guys have said, my main advice, especially from the street to COP or any other event or any other mobilization where youth want to be, because we're discussing policies that are going to affect our future, so we have to be involved all the time. So my main advice, it's talk to people, talk to everyone, make connections, because this is the way to get you opportunities. We have a expression in Portuguese that is cara de pau, that actually means like to have no shame. So you actually have to go and ask for what you want, You want money to get funded to come to COP? So send many emails, talk to everybody some way it's gonna happen, you know. That's how we all got here. At least that's how I got here. My first COP that I'm participating, it was having no shame and trying all the channels that I had and that I didn't have. I was like making way to new channels, creating ways. I know that it's, as I said before, I believe it was easier for me. I have many privileges, but I think that applies to everyone. Talk to people, connect, and have no shame. So yeah, that's my main takeaway.
Yeah, and I would also say believe in your power to drive change. And I remember, I think that the reason that over the years I was never too fed up with the convention process was because when I was a teenager, for years we were together with incredible activist friends representing indigenous peoples constituency, the gender constituency, and the youth constituency. We're trying to secure the first ever seat for youth and gender representative, and the second seat for indigenous peoples at a UN climate-related advisory board. And for years we thought, well, it would be pretty impossible that all member states would agree to give out power to rights holders. For what, you know, like, it would be a difficult battle. But I guess over the years, I think it made me realize that there are a lot of allies in governments or even difficult governments. So I would say believe in your power to drive change. And because we secured that seat in Glasgow, that was such a moment that I think whenever I think, oh, something is making me really frustrated in this process, that makes me think it is possible, even if back then when we were fighting for the seats, I wasn't feeling very optimistic, but change does happen. And I think, you know, for example, if you look at all the, and, you know, we're at the Spanish Pavilion, if you look at the European laws, for example, nature restoration law and different laws, they wouldn't have happened or wouldn't be as inclusive, as ambitious as it is, although never perfect, without the activist voices. And same with, you know, marching on the streets. I think very often I hear people say, oh, don't just march on the street, also do the policy work. And then tell the policy people, don't just do the policy work, also go march on the street. And I think also just be happy with yourselves, you know, like it is really important that if you enjoy being the ones marching on the street, then so be it. Or being the ones just enjoying sometimes boring multilateral policy. I think, you know, we need to push from all sides, and including from within. So, and also that reminded me of a documentary I watched called We Are Guardians. It's about how an indigenous rights activist and a feminist fought within a state in Brazil for indigenous rights and also against deforestation. So I was really impressed by that. I think it was supported by Human Rights Watch.
And 1.1 is more important your people they involved in national politics. The agreement is very important. The COP is so important, but in the implementation, the agreements in your country, the acts in the local community is the first. So this is my recommendation. I am represent the youth and children in the Minister of Foreign Affairs, but my work more important is the education in the territories, is actions for the natural disaster and involucrate to the implementation the Paris Agreement, but in my country. This is very important, but the implementation is the first.
I wanted to add 3 more quick points. One of the things that I wish I did better was follow-ups. So like when you meet people that can help you either now or potentially down the road, like do that initial follow-up, even if you don't have an ask, just for like a, hey, it was nice to meet you, glad to be connected, and then keep up with them, you know, to build that relationship. And then second thing was leave time for reflection. So after you've completed something, whether successful or unsuccessful, if you call it that, take time to think about what worked well, what didn't work well, what could have been done better, get insight and feedback from your peers on the process as well. And the last part is think about scale and how to replicate these things, not just for yourself, but let's say, for example, if we go back to the plastic bag ban, if they wrote down the process of how they got it done in their country or their locality, and then share that with other youth who want to do it where they live, right? That's a good way to scale those efforts and try to have a wider, national movement or an international movement with something that started locally.
Thank you. Very nice ending to this question. Actually, on like building, like taking time for self-reflection, connections, and also like feedback and how to scale it up. So thank you for your intervention. So I was thinking about the time we have. Maybe we have like time for one question from the public, or even like two quick questions. I don't know, someone.
You can take the questions together.
Yeah, maybe that's a good idea.
Okay, quick question then. So in November, earlier November, this like just happened a week ago. Trump got elected. This was about to come up. You probably were expecting that. But yeah, Trump has been elected to the president of the United States. And so, as people, all of us who are not Americans and have not the right to vote, but are going to be affected by the policies that Trump is going to bring to the table, especially because we know that he really doesn't take seriously climate change and wants to invest and put more emphasis on coal and gas development. So I guess that we all feel a sense of helplessness and like we're not empowered to solve this issue in any problem. So how do you cope with that? How do you cope as a youth leader to try to to understand how to move forward?
Well, Pooja should start that question.
Yeah, I have an answer to that, but let's take the other question too.
Yeah, thank you so much. So really quick also, I wanted to ask you, concerning what Maida said some minutes ago about, this sort of digitalization of activism, if you think that now there's a current trend for that type of activism, and what do you think will happen in the future? So, and I'm also kind of asking myself, this title should be from the streets to the COP or from Instagram to the COP? So just, to create a sort of debate. Thank you.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, one more? Okay. Good memories? Yeah.
My name is Nabila. I'm from Western Sahara, so I do represent youth, the youth of Western Sahara. I do have a question. If you do have any techniques or tips to denounce the falsehood of an occupant country, on a country that is considered not non-autonomous. I don't know if you know the question of Western Sahara.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
If you have any tips or techniques to denounce the greenwashing of an occupant territories on a territories that is considered non-autonomous.
Yeah. So I put Pooja on a tough question, and she put me on a tough question. No, I can take Trump. How about
I
that?
can take the Trump one. And maybe if the audience has an answer too to any of them. For the first one, I would say I focus on just mobilizing the base, right? So the country is a reflection of its people. At least in the U.S., everybody gets to vote. There is voter suppression and stuff, but everybody gets to vote. And unfortunately, in the popular vote, Trump won by a lot. It wasn't even close, honestly. And what I turn to is mobilizing the base, right? We need each person to advocate for the environment, to want to support leaders that are going to push for those policies. And so what does that take, right? That's the question I ask myself. What is it going to take to get a majority of the base to be on our side and then always consistently vote that way? But there are other factors at play, right? Like the decision, to provide arms to Israel, that made, played a big role in people just not voting, period, because why would you support either government, right? And so we have a long ways to go, I think.
Oh, yeah, I can go next. First on Trump. I think I was really surprised when the news went out, and I was like, obviously, like that was a depressing morning in Europe time zone. And then I start getting lots of messages and newsletters from the groups and coalitions that I'm part of or subscribe to, and it's all about sending a message of hope that we have been there, and the states will, and the negotiators will not just evaporate. Although, say if the worst happens and if they are no longer a member state of the Paris Agreement, they will still be engaged in the process. Obviously, the level of ambition will be completely different, but at the same time, and there are various actors driving change within the states, and I think I really like the point raised by some coalitions that again, we're now in 2024, and it's very different from 2016, as in, for example, the level of energy transition and climate technologies or various climate solutions are, the world has changed a lot, and hoping that now with, obviously other countries' politics are not looking that great, but some countries, and this year my favorite election was Iceland, and Mexico wasn't that bad either. And I think there are elections that give me hope, and I think we should mobilize the progressive countries to put pressure on the State Department. And we are civil society, and there are so many ways we can continue to drive change in our work, and also mobilize different civil society and private sector and international organizations, and including parts of the government, and also different states, right, within the U.S. So I think there are various opportunities. Yes, I am not a fan of Trump. I can just say that, like, it's obvious. But I think, yes, it's a disappointing news, and yes, it shows the amount of work that needs to be done. But at the same time, action is going to keep happening. And I think it's really important to see the hope and turn the disappointment, frustration, and anger into motivation of more work. And then on that question, I mean, my work has very much always been multilateral policy, and as a person in my life, I never got to vote anywhere, so I don't really have much human rights myself. So for me, it's just I really don't have any professional experiences on issues like that, and I'm not sure if others do. But I would say it's really important that activists and whatever your day job, or if you're a student, whatever your personal or professional work is, it's important to keep fighting for climate justice and rights-based, whether it's in politics or whether it's in legislations, whether it's in at a national level, local level, or international level. And I think we see a lot of climate injustice across all countries, but especially in countries with particular challenging circumstances. So I think it's important to keep fighting for it, and I have so much respect for the environmental human rights defenders and others keep fighting that fight.
In the Trump situation, I am not afraid for the United States situation, but the companies in the United States is very involucrated to the climate action and financial. They're more in the world, and very involucrated to the just transition energy. So the political decision is affected the agreement, but not affecting the just transition in the world. So this is my position. For the situation in Sahara, my country is very powerful people. My people, the Mapuche people, is a very resistant. So my recommendation for the Sahara situation is one, visibilization the situation and the history for your people in social media and the space for the COP or other space. In the second is involucrate for the youth on the other people, so do you affected companies. So in Chile, the Norway is very affected in the south, in the Patagonia, for the salmon, and the Mapuche people is very affected for this. So the people organization and protest in Norway and involve the youth in Norway in the demands for the companies. So is the strategy.
Well, I'm going to answer then the only question about online activism. Yes, I feel like more and more we're turning to online activism to talk about these issues. Yes, it could be an opportunity to reach more audiences, but it can also present more challenges to the activism because people feel like they've done enough by just sharing a post on Instagram, right? Oh, save the Amazon or whatever, or something like that. And they're just like, okay, I did my part. But that's definitely not enough. There's so much more to do. So I believe that online activism works until a certain point. We've seen in Brazil the case of laws that were about to be passed. We had a law on the property of our coast, so they wanted to privatize our coast, right? So people could buy beaches, for example. So it was a big pressure online. People from all over the country were posting and saying, no, I'm against it, and the law didn't pass. It was like, it really brought attention to an issue that wasn't being talked about by, like, among the population. And when it ended up online, it became viral, people were talking about it, and the government had to take a step back. So that was a case that online activism actually worked. But it only worked because a famous person brought attention to the issue. So, so we have to find also these partnerships, right? But we have to take the activism from the online sphere to the public sphere, right? So I feel like organizing events and moments where youth can reunite, where they can meet up. For example, I went to a acoge this year in Berlin. That is like a Latin America conference of, sorry. Yeah, I don't remember the exactly regional. Yes, perfect. It's the regional conference on climate in Latin America. I went to Berlin, and I remember I was so happy because I got to meet so many people who were like-minded, and we got to talk about so many issues, you know, and really up our game and up our discussions. So when you get out of the online and you meet people in person, you know, it's definitely different. So yes, we can start in the online, but get out of it and meet up in the streets, right? And meet up to talk about these issues and pressure the governments, the private sector, and et cetera, everybody who needs to be pressured on this. So yeah, I think that's my point. Yes, it could be Instagram to cop, but I feel like it would be too limiting. So we should keep streets, right?
And one more, sorry, is I am create the company, my company, startup, for the political is very slowly in implementation. The activities is very necessary, but enough's enough. So the startups and the companies and the other actor is more the action, and fast action is very necessary for the climate crisis. It's now. So this is my recommendation. The political and the activity is very necessary, but it's very slowly. So the action and involucrate, create projects is more necessary now.
Thank you very much. I think we have a couple of minutes to finish, so they can finish also the streaming. So thank you very much. I very much agree with what you just mentioned on how it is necessary not to bring the attention. It's true that digital and online activism becomes very viral very quickly. You can reach a lot of people, but there's a sense of then I did my part, you know. So like there's still a way of like pushing maybe also online how to bring what Mayra was mentioning, how to bring also the attention of how important is public mobilization and public engagement in climate related topics. So thank you. We talked about then digital online activism, how international policies affect global climate policies at the global scale. We talked about the United States. We talked about the reality in different countries, and also how we have to be insistent and convincing, not only because we believe in the cause, but also because we believe others should also take action and respond to our demands. So I think this was a very fruitful, interesting panel, bringing realities from Brazil, India, China, and Chile, and also thank you to you for engaging also with your questions. And I think we have to finish, but if you have anything to add now informally, we can still chat a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.